The safe withdrawal rate, also known as the 4% rule, is a rule of thumb that many people use in order to try and get a general idea of how much money they will need to have saved when they retire. It's a pretty good rule of thumb to start with in my opinion, and I've covered it in more depth in previous videos, which I'll link in the description if you're interested in finding out more, but the basic idea is that you need to have roughly 25 times your annual expenses saved when you retire to have a reasonable expectation of not running out of money after you leave the workforce. Some people want to be a little bit more conservative and use a 3% safe withdrawal rate. And if that works better for you because you're concerned the 4% rule isn't conservative enough in today's climate, then more power to you. Ultimately, it's just a rule of thumb to give us an idea of how much money we may need to have in order to live in retirement. But some people take this concept even further, and they use it to not only give them an idea of how much money they're going to need to save in order to be financially independent, but also as a tool to help them stop wasting money on recurring expenses. Today, we're going to be talking about what those people do as we cover the 300 times multiplier method, and we're also going to be looking into a similar strategy that people use to stop wasting money on one-time expenses. Hey everyone, Daniel here, and welcome to Next Level Life, a channel where you can learn all about investing, debt, retirement, and many other financial topics besides, because let's face it, the schools aren't going to teach it for us. So if any of those topics sound interesting to you, or if you want to learn how to better handle your money and have more financial freedom, be sure to hit that subscribe button and the bell next to my name to be notified every time I upload a new video. And if you want to further support the growth of this channel, you can check out some of the links I've left down in the description below, which includes a 30-day free trial of Audible and 2 free audiobooks of your choice, as well as a list of some books that I would recommend checking out with your free trial. Or you can share this video with a friend and leave a comment down below letting me know what topics you'd like me to cover in future videos. So the 300 times multiplier method is a way that people try to help themselves control their spending and figure out what their priorities really are, all while helping to ensure that they are in fact saving enough money to either retire early or at least retire at the normal age. Basically, in a nutshell, the 300 times multiplier method is where you take a budget that you've already written. This is usually used in conjunction with a zero-sum budget, but you can make it work with other budgeting methods. It's just a little messier and more difficult. And they analyze all of the categories in terms of a retired person's lifestyle. Just as a quick example, say that John takes home $36,000 a year and has the following budget categories: rent, transportation, household expenses, living essentials, and lifestyle. Transportation would include things like a loan payment that he may or may not have on a car, as well as insurance, fuel, maintenance, repairs, other fees such as car tabs, parking tolls, and anything else that might come up during the month. Household expenses include things like your utilities, internet, cable, maybe if he has it, possibly a cell phone, and other household materials like toiletries. Living essentials include the groceries, clothing, personal care items, medication, and stuff like that. Lifestyle would include any sort of vacations, entertainment, movies, gym memberships, eating out, and giving would probably also go under this category, among other things. John writes down what he spends in all of these various categories and then looks at each of them and asks himself, is this item worth saving 300 times what I'm spending on it so that I'm able to continue paying for it when I retire? And John can do this with any line item on his budget, whether it's his rent costs and asking whether it's worth renting a place that's as expensive as his is, or whether he'd be happier retiring earlier but in a less expensive place, all the way down to smaller things such as a monthly Netflix subscription. John's monthly expenses in this hypothetical example anyway add up to about $2,500 a month. That means that according to the 4% rule, he would need to have at least $750,000 saved by the time he decides to retire in order to have a reasonable expectation of not running out of money based on those expenses. And if we assume that John's investments make, on average, 8% per year over the long haul, which is right about what the market has done historically, we can get an idea of how long it will take John to not only reach retirement, but how much time each individual item is going to cost him on his journey towards achieving financial independence, which may help John to figure out what is and what is not worth spending the money on. Since John is taking home $36,000 a year and spending roughly $30,000 a year, he has $6,000 a year, or $500 a month, left over to invest for his retirement. His retirement savings goal is about $750,000, assuming, again, the 4% rule is what he's using as his guide, and under these assumptions, it'll take John about 30 years to reach his retirement savings goal. And maybe he's okay with that, and if so, great. But if he wanted to speed up his time to reaching retirement, he could do it by looking at each of the line items in his budget and figuring out which of them survived the 300 times test. For an example on a small scale, take a look at his Netflix subscription, which costs him about $10 a month or $120 a year to keep. $120 a year times 25, or $10 a month times 300, either way, is how we would figure out how much John needs to save in order to cover this expense in retirement. And we get an answer of $3,000. So if John canceled his Netflix subscription in retirement, he would lower his retirement savings goal from $750,000 to $747,000. And looking back at this chart from the 30th year of John's journey to financial independence, we see that $747,000 is not going to save him much time. As a matter of fact, due to how the compounding works, it's going to save him almost a month, since he jumped from $744,000 in the 11th month of that year to $750,000 at the end of the year. So in this particular example, John's Netflix subscription probably isn't something he's likely to cancel because it's just not going to cost him much more time to save enough to keep it. However, this could change if he had a bunch of small expenses similar to Netflix that, when put together, could add up to a big amount. Maybe at that point he would want to change his buying habits when it comes to subscriptions and maybe cancel a few of them, but that's not the case here, so he moves on to another line item. In this case, it's his car loan, which is costing him roughly $500 a month, right about average here in the US. $500 a month is $6,000 a year, and to cover a $6,000 a year expense in retirement, following the 4% rule, you would need to have to save $150,000. Meaning that if John could find another solution to his transportation situation, or, just pay off the debt before he retires, he would lower his savings goal from $750,000 to $600,000. That is a full 20% reduction in his total retirement savings goal. And in our hypothetical example, John broke the $600,000 mark in his investments in 27 years and 6 months, meaning that paying off the car loan would save him 2.5 years worth of saving for retirement, or give him more wiggle room in retirement if he still decided to work and save for the full 30 years. So that's basically the gist of this budgeting trick. But I can hear some of you already saying, I'm not going to cut out all of my expenses only to have to live a life of boredom or destitution, and my reply is, good for you. Neither do I. This trick is not meant to stop you from spending any money ever, or deny yourself all forms of joy from spending. It's just to help you frame up your future purchases a little bit differently, so that you can be aware of the true cost of an item or service. Small purchases can add up quickly, especially if there's a bunch of them, and large purchases or debts can really slow down your journey to reaching financial independence. That doesn't mean that no small or large purchase isn't worth the money. Some of them are worth the money, but we want to make sure we're always at least considering what we're doing before we do it, and that whatever it is we're buying is truly worth it to us. Because ultimately, all this trick is trying to do is stop you from experiencing buyer's remorse. And in my experience anyway, it does help do that. So before making your next purchase, or signing that next loan, or joining that next subscription service, take a few seconds to figure out how much this new item will cost you per year and multiply that by 25. Or how much it costs you per month and multiply it by 300. And ask yourself if you're willing to save that much money just to support whatever it is you're buying. If you are, then by all means, go forward with it. But if not, then don't let yourself experience buyer's remorse. Now, one thing that you may have noticed with the 300 times method is that while it may work well with some things like recurring expenses, such as housing, debt, subscriptions, and things of that sort, it doesn't quite have the same impact on one-time expenses. For example, let's say that Henry was thinking about buying a new laptop. The laptop costs about $400, and a laptop is not a recurring expense. I mean, it doesn't cost him $400 a month to buy a laptop, or even $400 a year, unless he was really into computers and bought new ones that frequently. For most of us, a laptop is more like a one-time thing. We use it until it stops working, and then maybe we get a new one at that point, but it's not really a recurring expense, in the traditional sense. And since we don't know exactly how long the computer is going to last us, it is a little more difficult to figure out the effect of that purchase using the 300 times method. You can do it, of course, it's just more difficult. So what can we do to help ensure that we don't experience that same buyer's remorse in this kind of situation? Well, we can look at these one-time purchases through the lens of how many hours we would have to work in order to pay for whatever it is we're considering buying. Let's go back to Henry and say that he's making $15 an hour, or $31,200 a year. That laptop would cost him almost 27 hours of work to pay for, assuming we didn't take taxes into consideration. If we did, of course, Henry would likely be looking at roughly an entire working week to pay for that laptop. And once taxes are taken into consideration, Henry could be spending anywhere from 1.5% to maybe even 2% of his entire after-tax income on a laptop, which he may be okay with. And again, that's fine. Just like the 300 times method, looking at these purchases through this lens isn't meant to make us regret every purchase we've ever made or stop us from making any future purchases at all. It's merely meant to get us to take a few seconds and consider our purchases more carefully so that we don't fall victim to buyer's remorse unnecessarily. In other words, it's just meant to help us figure out what we consider to be truly worth the money and what we may not consider to be truly worth the money so that we can stop wasting it. But that'll do it for me today. Once again, if you enjoyed this video, be sure to subscribe and hit that bell next to my name so you'll be notified of all my future uploads. I generally upload every single Monday, and if you have a friend that would be interested in this kind of content, be sure to share it with them. Let's really get this information out there and start our own financial revolution.